Vivian James Rigney is one of the most impressive people you could possibly meet. He has climbed the 7 summits. He delivers coaching to a whole variety of different executives.
We all have negative thoughts. The most common thoughts are, am I good enough? Am I smart enough? What do people think of me? Do I know what's going to happen next? Do I really know what's going to happen next? And if I do this or say this or be this, how will I be judged? And you and I are working with business executives, with men and women who have to constantly assess facts, have to be agile, develop, move with the times. If you have setbacks, you take it on the chin and you move on. In a corporate environment, you're based on performance. You're rewarded on performance. The meritocracy exists in the free market that we live in. There's a wonderful sense of inferiority complex that drove me to climb Everest. It all started to fall apart as I got higher and higher up the mountain. All of that stripped away and I felt naked on summit day. Inside, I didn't know why I was there. The phone rang and the Irish ringtone, and then my father answered the phone. And I remember hearing his voice and we had a conversation. And he said to me, "We are very proud of you." First time. And I realized this on summit day, that I'd been so blooming conscious of what other people think and filtering that to what would land well or be reasonable or be optimal.
To get this shiny white object.
To get the shiny white object.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Change Your Minds podcast. I'm Owen Fitzpatrick, and I'm joined today by a very, very good friend of mine. Vivian James Rigney is one of the most impressive people you could possibly meet. He has climbed the 7 summits. He lives in New York City. He delivers coaching to a whole variety of different executives, one of the top people in the industry. And today, I've got the lucky opportunity to interview Vivian in his office in the middle of Manhattan. And delighted to be back with you again, Vivian.
It's great to be here and great to do this interview.
So already we spoke on the Change Your Minds podcast before, and you talked us through this incredible book here. If you haven't read this book, I'm telling you, I raved about it the last time. I'm not going to spend the entire interview raving about this book, but it is one of the best written books I've ever read in my life. And that is not, you know me and hyperbole, I don't really do it that often. I always do it. No, I don't do it that often, but this is a phenomenal book. Just really brings you to Everest, and it's the closest thing I've ever seen to actually getting the experience itself.
Thank you.
Recently, I got my citizenship in America. I now have 2 passports, like you. So now we are both secret agents together. Let me ask you this. What do you love about America? Because right now we have a lot of stuff going on. There's obviously an awful lot of challenges that America's facing at the moment. You're living here longer than I am. What do you love about America?
The love started when I was 3 years old. So I have a memory. When I was 3 years old, I was one of 5 boys of sneaking down to the bottom of the house, to the basement where there was a TV, turning on the TV at 3 years old and watching this, I don't know, it was like some sort of beach series, you know, with lifesavers and cops and firefighters in California. And I remember watching this thing and being totally enchanted. This whole idea of what is this country? The sun is always shining. The people are always smiling. Things are always happening. And I remember as a 3-year-old watching this TV and feeling this energy coming out from the TV. And as I got older, you know, in Ireland, we have Irish people very proud of our past, very proud of what we've become as a country. But we have this innate connection with the United States. And it's always been there. From the mass immigration of Irish people through the very tough times back in the famine into the US, you know, 150 years ago. And since then, lots of people moving. So every family in Ireland, it feels like, have direct members who are living in the US. So as a child, not only was I seeing this through TV, but I was always getting very much a feeling of, in a way, Irish people are part American. We recognize the American dream. We relate to it. We have family connections to it. So the love for America has always been there since I was a kid. And I think I was, built my career, left Ireland, lived in 7 different countries. First foreign country was the United Kingdom. Then I moved to Germany and South Africa, and then France, Germany again, then Finland. And I was coming to the US every quarter for work. I remember coming in 2006, and before I got on the plane back to Finland, I was living there at the time. I remember actually really missing. I was only here for, I don't know, 5 days, but missing New York
Hmm.
City. I was going back to Finland, to my life there, and really thinking, God, it'd be amazing if I could live here, build something here, and the energy of America. So I didn't really know what my life would look like, other than this magnetism of opportunity that New York City represented, uh, and the US, I guess, at that time. So it took me a year to get a visa.
Hmm.
I convinced immigration I was a worthy alien, and I got my visa happily, and I came here in 2007. Um, and that was interesting because 2007, it was all caviar and champagne, the economy. Early '07, it was all, economy was rocking. And then 18 months later, it was the Great Recession, September 2008. So I arrived when things were all, blue sky, and then massive storm clouds, and that immersion in that was a real baptism of fire about
Hmm.
America, what it represents, and getting through that. And for me, it was eye opening. It it was exponentially impactful in a positive way about why I came here and what this country represents, and the opportunity, even in the Great Recession, the opportunity. So for me, they were pervasive, and the ability to risk take was something that I clearly saw, and that, yeah, back to you.
There's because it reminds me of my own journey. So my first time to the States, because I've been obsessed with New York, not necessarily the States, but New York since I was a kid as well. I remember getting a book when I was like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old, and I was just like fascinated reading it through, you know. And the very first time I was here was about 25 years ago. Now, actually, almost 25 years exactly, right? And I spent the summer here on a J1 visa, which was, as you know, a student visa. And I remember on the plane, I didn't know anybody that I had someone that I knew that might be coming a little bit later in the summer, but I was flying effectively on my own. And I remember just being on the plane and just being so excited. And honestly, every single time I've gone and flown back to the States, specifically New York, I still have that excitement. There's something about that. There's something about that trip that to this day still excites me. Also, when I arrived, I moved here 2019, so significantly after you. But a year after that was COVID, and I was in an apartment in Brooklyn on my own, miles away from anyone else, locked off from the world, far away from my family back in Ireland. And yet, there's something magical and wonderful about this beautiful city and this, amazing country. However, there are problems. What are the main challenges and the things that maybe frustrate you, or maybe you struggle with, or you hope that America will get figured out over the course of the next few years?
Well, yeah, we live in a very partisan environment here. And I became a citizen in 21, so I'm 3 years in. My first federal election coming up.
Me too, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's bizarre in a way. I think I can just relate to our experiences. Been growing up in Ireland, living in different parts of the world, you learn to, that there's no nirvana, right? There is no nirvana. Maybe there's an afterlife for those who reflect on that. But in the day to day, there's always ups and downs. And I think people in America can have this aspiration for, for being their best, which I love about it, and opportunities and aspiring around that. But people here don't necessarily reflect back on how it compares to the rest of the world. So right now, the economy here is doing pretty well. When you go back to Europe, things are much more difficult. You go to Asia, things are very difficult. China, things are very difficult. South America, speaking to my friends down there, really difficult. We kind of forget about the good things we have here, and people tend to focus a lot on the problems, which is important, right? We have to focus. We have to keep things in perspective and look at facts and look at details. And I think when people go down the road of focusing on emotions, whichever side they're on,
Sure.
on the dramatic, on the right, on the left. You get into this emotional discussion, which is disconnected from reality. And you and I are working with business executives, with men and women who have to constantly assess facts, have to be agile, develop, move with the times. If you have setbacks, you take it on the chin and you move on. You don't get a luxury of bathing in that difficulty. You have to pull yourself up and get on. And I think people in the political environment here, it feels like right now with this partisan environment we're in, people are sitting in that emotion, which as an immigrant, I'm here 17 years. It's, this country has always been great to me. And if we could just move past the emotions
Hmm.
and dig into what we can do and reflect on the good things we have and harness those fully, and this is obviously an issue regarding social media, and the media environment has changed dramatically in the last 20 years, and people are driven by algorithms, and the
Hmm.
algorithms drive emotions. So on many levels here, and it's funny, in a corporate environment, you can have whatever social media you want, but you're based on performance.
Hmm.
You're rewarded on performance. The meritocracy exists in the free market that we live in. But in the political arena, people lose track of that and they sit in their position. And the center ground is a very narrow place. And you look at the numbers right now in terms of polls, it's a tiny place. Most people are in their camps.
And the frustrating thing for me is, and I take everything that you said, I agree with. I think the real challenge for me is there's a concept in neuroscience called affective realism, and this notion that our emotions don't just, and what you said about the way we feel influences how we're experiencing the world. Well, that's pretty much what they've seen is that your version of reality, the way you actually experience reality, is very much dictated to by whatever emotion that you feel at that time. So we build ourselves, we create
Mm,
stories in our head, narratives that we tell ourselves about the world. And then you go on the media, as you mentioned, you go to Fox News, you go to CNN, you see a totally different reality, and you buy into your reality, you choose your lane. Our brains are wired to want to keep watching stuff that agrees with what we have to reduce what we call cognitive dissonance, this tension between what we believe and what we do. And with all of that, as you mentioned, this polarized sort of partisan environment means that I think everyone is over indexing on how important politics is. Politics is very
mm,
important, but to so many people, it's everything. To so many people, it's,
right.
people are talking as if you vote for the other team, you are destroying America. You
Right.
are ruining it. We're going to
Right.
go into this. We're going to go into that. And I think that hyperbole, that exaggeration, where you don't, I'm sure you get it in other countries, but in America, they do drama
Yeah.
better than anywhere else. I don't care where you
Yeah.
live. They know how to dramatize it.
Right.
And to me, it doesn't matter as much. It matters, but it doesn't matter as much as I think we think it matters because it's
Right.
constantly reinforced.
There's one word that's lacking in this entire argument, Owen, and that's the lack of curiosity. What's interesting is, you go to whichever side of the aisle you're on, you go to the middle of the country, you may have people going to rallies that are so focused on one side or the other. Yet if you have you know, if you need anything, Midwest people, for me, I find are amazing people, very, very generous,
Yeah,
very, very down to earth, very pragmatic. You have a puncture on the road, somebody will stop and help you. If you stop and need something, people will go out of their way, innate preponderance to help you and to go out of their way. And again, so we have this innate ability, but people kind of can forget about their values sometimes
hmm,
when the emotion overtakes that. It's almost like an amygdala hijacked back of the
sure.
mind, right? And we go down these and we stay in these camps. And the word curiosity is the word that's lacking. Your curiosity to ask you, okay, so you believe in X, tell me more about that. Or let's see what's important for you these days. Well, what's important is, economic freedom. What does that look like to you? And dig into that and curiosity about peeling back the layers in a non-threatening way, but in a way to understand more and know more. And I think when people forget about where they are at their core, they can be easily hijacked into someone else's view,
Mm,
perhaps someone else's agenda. And the emotional piece of that gets very sticky and very messy, but it limits us, it closes our aperture.
sure.
So there is no space for curiosity. But so, how do we learn? And if there's no space for curiosity, how do we inspire our children, our kids? How does America remain an innovator in the world? How do we compete effectively? And how do we raise children to believe in themselves, but also be humble that life is hard and you got to work hard and there is no free pass. You got to work at it. How do you balance this out? And that's the I think with this social media and everything that's happened in the last
Hmm.
20 years, I think the world's trying to digest what that means. And is there a fulcrum which comes back to, or the needle comes back to the center
I mean,
more so than the extremes?
I think historically there has been, right? And it seems to go in sort of these sort of circles or cycles. However, it's hard to imagine that happening when the algorithms, let's say, or the media companies and social media are rewarded by the polarization that they successfully accomplish. I mean, the more people are arguing online, the better they do. The more angry they make us, the more scared they make us, the more we pay attention. They leverage our negativity bias. But for me, one of the interesting things about this whole area, for me, as someone who is like devoted to studying everything to do with beliefs and why we believe what we do and why we tell ourselves the stories that we do, is, and you mentioned it beautifully, that the notion of curiosity, so often we fall into the trap of just thinking in terms of tolerance, right? You need to be more tolerant, but that's the wrong word, because tolerant is almost like I'll tolerate you.
Right.
Whereas curiosity is I genuinely want to learn where you're coming from. And the best way to persuade anyone, to influence anyone, as you'll know well in terms of your work also, is to be able to connect with what they already believe. The PIN model, for example, in negotiations, positions, interests, needs,
Mm.
is all about taking the positions, which is this is what I want, and diving deep, being able to dig underneath that and go, well, what's really going on? The work that you do when you're coaching executives never works necessarily on the surface. It works underneath because in order for you to be able to get the best out of them, you have to help them understand what's going
Right. And
on.
it's always understanding the positive intent of the other person,
Yeah.
meaning the other person doesn't get out of bed in the morning wanting to be miserable, wanting to be difficult, wanting to be challenged. Most people put their leg out of bed in the morning and they want to be okay.
Yeah.
They want to make a difference.
Yeah.
Or they just, as a minimum, they want to just be themselves. And when you understand what that positive intent is, it maybe they're hurting, maybe they're angry because of X, because
Hmm.
of Y. That curiosity leads to an ability to build rapport with somebody, but also gets more data. And in the world we're in, we're coaching executives and people. These are people where data is valued. And on a human level, data allows us to build rapport, allows us to see what's behind the curtain. There's always a story.
Sure.
And with children, if you're a parent, if you don't understand, what's causing your child to act out or feel sad or feel that way, and most parents have figured that out really quickly. Got to understand what little Johnny or little Mary, what's driving that.
Sure.
If we did that at large, can you imagine the difference that would make? We just use those skill sets that we use with our family, with our children, people very close to us, in order to learn more.
I mean, I think there's a fundamental misconception most of us have, which is this thought that once we're adults, well, now we're sorted, right? There's no more,
Right.
we don't have to be taken care of. And honestly, when I go on social media, sometimes I'm like, there's more childish behavior in social media than you'd see in kindergarten, I do want to, before moving on to some of the other things, I do want to talk about Ireland for a moment. So we've talked about America and why America is a beautiful country, why the two of us are very happy to be here in many ways, with all its flaws. And America's plenty of flaws, but plenty of wonderful qualities about it as well. Fundamentally, as much as I love living here, and I feel very lucky to be part of this, I'm Irish. I love my country. I love Ireland. I'll always be Irish. When I die, I want to be known as Irish, Irishman that lived and died and lived in America and was taken in and had an incredible time that he spent in America. But fundamentally, my nationality is so important to me. and I know it is to you too. From your perspective, what are the things you love most about Ireland? A lot of times people say, "What do you miss about Ireland?" But what do you love about Ireland? What makes Ireland
Mm.
special? What makes Irish people special? What makes our country special?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm going to make a radical statement. I think nationalism is so overrated in general. And I get that question because people say to me, what's your favorite place you've lived in? Favorite country? You lived in all these countries, you've traveled to whatever, 80, 85 countries. And what I've learned is that every country has something to offer. You learn something from everywhere because there are people everywhere. They may look different, they may sound different, different languages, whatever. But ultimately, the learning is pervasive. When I think of my roots in Ireland, I was back there recently again. The humility that comes with Irish people is opened the doors to so much opportunity for me in traveling the world. You don't go to places with a fixed view of people or a view that you're better than them or that your history is better than them. Ireland's had a tough history over a long time. And Irish people, it's kind of gone into our DNA that we've had to leave our country, over the last few centuries to find work, to build a life. And now in the last 30 years, that's all it's been really. 30 years, Ireland's been transformed. Now it's a very wealthy country, but it's also a very open country. And you see how it was a very country driven by the church when we were growing up. And you couldn't talk against that authority. And right now, religion is something personal to people as opposed to state sanctioned. On top of that, you look at the openness. You go back to Ireland now. It's a multicultural society. There are people from all over the world, from all over Europe, working in Ireland, building their dreams, building their lives, all passionate about it. They can handle the rain. I don't know how
Yeah,
they do it. It's
yeah,
incredible. But I go back there and I feel that energy. And
yeah,
Ireland is about the country of possibility. So people are very relaxed. And manana, manana, we take it to a whole new level in Ireland. We tell a joke in Ireland, we tell a joke, but we're smiling as we tell the joke. In
yeah,
other countries, you might have a dry look. In Ireland, we're laughing as we tell the joke.
yeah.
We lean into the laugh. We love the rapport. The downside of that is we kind of avoid conflict. You want everyone to be our best friend and all the rest of it. But you have that ability to find the humor in many things. You have that easygoingness. You have the wonderful music. You have the culture. You have an island that's constantly enriched by the rain and the wind and the fresh air and the freshest air of 5,000 kilometers or 3,000 miles of Atlantic Ocean.
I love that idea of we're enriched by the rain and the fresh air, whereas it's like it's raining and it's freezing.
I
But
know. And in Ireland,
yeah,
people will say if it's pouring from the heavens,
yeah,
you pass them on the street and they say to you, yeah, soft day, soft day, it's a bit
Let,
brighter this afternoon. And the sun mightn't have shone for 2 weeks.
yeah,
And they say it's a bit brighter this
yeah.
afternoon.
But look, there's just a few thoughts on that as well, because again, I'm being over in New York for about 5 years or so now. I'm looking back, and when I go home regular enough to see my parents, who I'm very close to, and it's starting to occur to me a lot more of the things that I notice about Ireland. First of all, one of the things that you mentioned there was about the humor, and I just don't think there's a better sense of humor in the world. I mean, I just absolutely, one of the things that I realized is when even my family, and I never figured this out until I left. But my mum and dad, who are, I'm the biggest fan of, they're always looking to joke around
Right.
in whatever way that is, always looking to joke. And it's just like a program. And it's not just them, it's any of my friends. Whenever you meet most people in Ireland, a joke's around the corner. It's always looking to be messing about, and we're always messing with each other and stuff.
And it's a self-deprecation, which
Yes,
is very, very Irish.
yes,
And that is real humor because it comes from the heart
yeah,
and there's no agenda.
yeah.
And there's no, everyone. And we're terrible. And usually in Ireland, we use the word slagging each other
That's
off
right.
or
Exactly what I
ribbing
was
each
thinking.
other
Yeah.
in American. And that for us is natural.
Yeah.
So we're constantly going through this barrage
And that keeps us
of
humble.
it keeps us humble. It
But
keeps us
there's a
humble.
dark side to that,
There is a
Vivian.
dark side
And
to
let's
that.
talk about that for a moment because in New York, you don't have that dark side. You have the other side. You have the
Right.
you can do it. You're amazing. Congratulations. If you win, you succeed. Go on, Vivian. I'm in your corner. And I think Ireland's getting a bit better. But I certainly know as I was growing up, I'm sure as you were growing up, and even in terms of working for myself, there is the whole thing, what we say in Ireland, oh, you've got some notions. Oh, you think you're great, do
Right.
you? Look at you there with your American. Like every time I go to Ireland, I'm like terrified that friends of mine will hear me and go, "Oh, you have an American accent now. Do you think you're?"
Yeah, yeah. You turn into a yank on
That's
us.
it, exactly. So, what are your thoughts about that sort of dichotomy? On the one hand,
Yeah.
you mentioned at the beginning, the thing you
Yeah.
most love is humility, the humility of Ireland and
Right.
open doors. And I never really clicked like that, but you're so right. On the flip side of that humility, it comes at a cost. What are your thoughts when it comes to, that kind of almost paradoxical benefit yet disadvantage?
Have you ever heard of the joke about the two buckets with lobsters?
Remind me.
With the Irish bucket, you don't need the top on the bucket,
That's right, because they
right?
pull you back down.
Because if one lobster climbs up towards the top, the other ones will
That's
go,
right.
"No, you're trying to get out, and if I'm not getting out, you're not getting out. Come back down
That's
here
right.
again."
That's right.
And the other lobsters, they try to get
I
out. In America, the lobsters are trying to get out. Everyone's like, "Oh my God, he or she got out. Isn't
look
that
at that.
great?"
Look at that.
Whereas in Ireland, it's that, and that goes back to, look, definitely historical. It's not the current Ireland today, but I think it's in the bloodstream, and it still lives on to a degree. It'll change over time. Where the country was so poor, we had a historical past, we had a colonial past, and all of that was in our psyche. An inferiority complex, let's call it out to what it is, and then people making it too big, a feeling of perhaps they gamed the system, perhaps they got an advantage, and all that. And people went to America very often. They didn't come back. They went there, and the family would go there or join them, because things are so difficult in Ireland, over the past, couple of centuries. So I think it's a hangover from the past,
Hmm.
but I think it's changing. I think it's
Yeah,
changing a lot.
I
Yeah,
do.
Irish people are very international now. The amount of flights from Dublin Airport all over the world,
Hmm.
Hong Kong, Dubai, Doha, to a small little island of, I mean, it's was it 6.5 million people.
Oh yeah.
It's unbelievable.
And if you look at like I've seen on even on social media, you see some of the influencers coming up, but like inspirational people. There's a guy that does these runs. I think he calls it
That's
5K
right.
with
I've seen
Chris.
him. Yeah.
And I love that. When I see that, or when I see someone from Ireland doing well, or someone in, one of the sports like representing Olympics
Right.
or MMA or whatever it is on the world stage, I'm like, brilliant. I'm so happy to see that. I'm their biggest fan. And they have the country behind them,
Yeah.
because we very much love when someone, and that's the weird thing. On the one hand, it's like, come back here now. But on the other hand, if we have someone
Right.
like, for example, Katie Taylor, who's a
Right.
phenomenal, like, world's best athlete,
Yeah. Yeah.
we are the best fans in the
Yeah.
world for
Female
people
boxer
now.
for
Female
those who
boxer,
don't
yeah,
know. And it's the humility she exudes with the drive,
yeah,
with that passion, relentless
yeah,
in every situation. It's a wonderful combination. And
yeah.
again, the work I do in executive coaching is to get leaders to recognize you can be vulnerable and strong at the same time. You can be humble. You can be driven. You can have opinions, and those can live together. It doesn't have to be binary, one or the other, because once you move into the other camp, then the ego takes over, and then you become disconnected from people.
So let's talk about that for a bit. When you work with leaders, a large part of the work that you do is helping them to be able to tap into something underneath. So it's almost like people will label different elements like emotional intelligence or trying to help leaders become more authentic. But could you just tackle a little bit about what you see as the main challenge most of the leaders that you work with have in terms of the way in which they think, the way in which they communicate? And what is it that you're trying to do whenever you start working with them? What's your goal?
Yeah. Most of them overthink. So they're over engineering. Most of them are smart, experienced, seasoned. They're probably in their 40s, some of them early 50s. And these are all very driven people. The higher you go up on the leadership mountain, the air becomes thinner. Everyone starts listening to you. You work in the echo chamber. In the United States, you have this idea of, you become the commander in chief, or hail to the chief, right? In this country, there's not much of a safety net. So, if things go south, they can change very quickly here. So people are very cognizant of not screwing up, not getting it wrong, and they avoid failure. So on the one hand, you have this preponderance for confidence, and on the other hand, you have this fear of failure. So in between, what you have is that inner dialogue where people are running through in their mind what they are worried about, overthinking things, not necessarily trusting their intuition enough, overanalyzing the data, being over controlling, in some respects, delegating too much. And essentially, my work is really around shedding. One of my clients said to me one time after 6 months, coming to the end of our coach engagement, he said, Vivian, the biggest aha moment I had was that I had this picture in my mind, and every morning I wake up with this picture, and the picture is of a boat. And I go, tell me more. And he goes, before we started this program, I was, going through the water. I thought I had my sail up. I was doing everything. I was going as fast as I could. And I knew intuitively I wasn't doing my best. There was a resistance. I couldn't put my finger on it. And what this 6 months has done, this process, it's basically taken me into dry dock. And I've realized that on this boat, this unique, strong boat, it was underneath the waterline was covered in barnacles. All the baggage of the past, things I thought I needed to be, things I needed to, how I wanted people to see me, things I thought I believed in that were driving me. Then we had all the emotional stuff, the hijacks, the reactions. And I didn't realize that those are barnacles. The barnacles attach themselves to the boat, which means when you take it in dry dock, you can knock them off. He said this process of self-reflection has allowed me to recognize who I am under the nonsense. I like to think that we all come out of the womb as perfect beings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we get a lot of conditioning, parents, society, nowadays social media and everything that goes with that. And then at some point in our lives, we have a tipping point, hopefully. And on the other side of that tipping point, we want to put our boat in dry dock and let go of all that junk that we've gathered over the years and get back to who we were when we began this whole journey. So in a sense, our life takes us back to who we really are. Now the question is, how do we accelerate that process? Do we wait for osmosis? And hopefully we're a grandparent with grandchildren sitting on our knees, cooing in their ears, and we're at peace with ourselves, and the children or grandchildren feel that. They feel grandpa, grandma, there's something wonderful about them. And their parents go, my God, they weren't like that when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
But the joy there is that they figured it out. Or would people want to help that process sooner?
Would it be fair to say that
Shedding.
most people don't reach that? Because what I see is, and look, what I mainly do is I mainly notice what is wrong, right? In the sense that my main focus is helping people to be able to solve problems. And the problems that I mainly focus on is the beliefs that they have about themselves, the way they think, as well as the way in which they communicate or influence or impact other people. When you work with people and you really accelerate that process and you're tackling that, I mean, what's for you, what's the difference between that and therapy, for example? Because to me, it very much is a form of therapy. We would never label it that because it's in the
Right.
corporate world. But fundamentally, what is therapy if not the desire to be able to help people to understand themselves better, to deal with the all of that mesh that's on the floor that's dragging
Yeah.
them down, to clean that up and to make it so that they can feel the freedom that comes with self-awareness, self-acceptance, and with that, the drive to then pursue their own heart's desire.
Right. In a way, coaching is a form of therapy, but it's therapy with pragmatism
And future focus.
and future focus. Correct. So think of a coin, two sides to a coin. The first side is introspection. That's the kind of therapy, reflecting. Get people to listen to themselves, to hear themselves, to reflect and join the dots. But quickly moving into the other side of, well, that's great. We have introspection. What do we do with that? I got my clients, I got 6 months to do big things, not years, 6 months. The pragmatism is putting that into real world situations, real world case studies. They bring their problems, their challenges. Vivian, I've got this issue with somebody I'm working with, this issue on where I am with me in the organization and where I want to be, and engaging with them on that to deal with that on a day-to-day basis. So they internalize it, and then the introspection comes to life through that experience, and they make peace with that.
What is the most common limiting beliefs that you hear from the clients that you work with? What are the things that, if I had a penny for every time I heard this, I'd be rich? Those kind of things. I'm sure there's an individual, challenges, but what are the kind of things that you're like, this is a lot more prevalent than people would think?
So in one part of the program, we write down negative inner dialogue, NID, and that's the hijacks that they have, the thoughts that going. If we had a Bluetooth chip in their heads, times where they have negative thoughts, and everyone has this, and if they don't have it, that's a bad discussion, because I'm going to challenge. I'm going to get. Then the ego is protecting against that. We all have that. We all have negative thoughts. The most common thoughts are: am I good enough? Am I smart enough? What do people think of me? Do I know what's going to happen next? Do I really know what's going to happen next? And if I do this or say this or be this, how will I be judged? It's fascinating. These are people with incredible resumes. And inside, the stakes are so high. These thoughts are there. And we can see this also in the world of sports, whether you're watching the Olympics, whether you're watching athletes. The biggest thing they need to overcome is their mind. Because once they overcome these distractions, that energy can be redirected to their body and allows them to perform to the best of their ability, right? So their mind supports their body as opposed to taking away from it or distracting it.
And in many ways, isn't it fair to say that the negative internal dialogue that we engage in, when it's channeled appropriately, as opposed to creating this Pollyanna, everything's great, you need to be more positive, here, just repeat these mantras and you'll be fine, but actually accepting it and redirecting it, that's what drives these incredible leaders to become incredible leaders. That's what drives these Olympic athletes to perform at such a high level. It's not because they're just positive. They might have a great attitude, but there's a part of them that's driving them, this pain or this negative energy that is making them go, I do not want to do that. I cannot afford to experience this. I need to push forward and perform at the highest level possible.
Which is a really interesting point. I'm going to bring my answer back to America. One of the great parts of America is people celebrate failure here on one condition: that you have learned from it. That's the condition. So currently watching the Olympics, Simone Biles had a very difficult Olympics in Tokyo. A lot of hassle, a lot of grief. People were saying, she's not what she used to be, and she's going through this period, and her mind is overtaking her, and all that stuff. A lot of media talk about it. Olympics in Paris, 2024. Everyone supporting the resurrection, the phoenix from the ashes. America loves the comeback story.
Loves it underdog.
Entrepreneurialism is based on failing in order to succeed forward. But you have to learn, right? In Europe, we can weigh more heavily on, can you believe how he or she screwed up with that? Oh my God. And it hangs like a cloud.
Yeah.
And people become a little bitter with that. And then they break through, but it's almost like it's like a on your copybook. It's like a mark, an X. You're perfect, but don't forget that time where you really got it wrong. Whereas here, it's celebrated as part of breaking through, and it's a fabulous spirit.
That's very interesting, because you mentioned a comeback story, and I kind of responded with underdog, but they're different things. And I think whereas Ireland, for example, loves an underdog because we are underdogs.
Right.
Yeah, comeback story, not necessarily so much. Whereas in America, to your point, they definitely. Speaking of stories from your clients that you work with, one of the things that I sort of look at is the stories people tell themselves. So for me as a therapist, when I worked for so many years working with different clients with different issues, I noticed that there was, generally speaking, two main narratives that they would come in with. There was the victim narrative, which is the reason I have my problems is because of the world. So it could be the economy, it could be my parents, it could be my partner, it could be my kids, it could be my friends, it could be the world, my health, I'm bad luck. And then you've got the villain stories. And these are people saying, I'm my own worst enemy, I ruin everything, I'm no good, I'm not smart, those kind of things. From your own experience, which of those two do you think the executives that you work with, if there's more one than the other, or if it's more of a balance, do you tend to hear the clients when they talk about the challenges they have? Do they typically come more from a victim mindset, or do they typically come more from a sort of a villain mindset?
Yeah, at leadership level, senior leadership, it's more from the villain mindset, less more of this is all this stuff as bad as
Sure,
happening to me. They've just had to break through so many times. They've had to prove themselves. They've had to break through to be promoted, prove themselves again to be promoted, and again. So rinse and repeat. So it's more that stuff. The barnacles on the boat that are, gee, do I deserve to be here? A little bit of imposter syndrome. Do I have all the answers? I'm just being promoted to CEO or chief legal officer, but do I am I qualified to
and how do
answer
you
all that's been asked of me by board of directors or shareholders or analysts? That's the pressure chamber.
how do you then get them through the questions you ask, through the barnacles? How do you get them to the point where they go, I do deserve this, or maybe even if you get them to a
Mm.
maybe I deserve this, or why wouldn't I deserve? Like, how do you help them? Because ultimately they're the one doing the work. How do you guide them towards getting to that place where they start from, I'm out of my depth here. Do I know what I'm doing? I don't deserve this. Imposter syndrome. And how do you get them into the place, or what are the main milestones that lead them towards actually, I got this?
So you just used one of the phrases you mentioned a moment ago. I don't deserve this. So I say to them, okay, tell me what that means. And they'd say, no, I've always had an issue with fear of failure. And I'll say, always. Tell me about that. What does always mean? He said, always. Were you born like that? And they'll go, I was, yeah. Instinctive answer. And that's when we have fun. I said,
Sure.
really? You came out of the womb like that?
Yeah.
Really? How do you know that? And then you get a cough and a splutter. And they're like, well, probably didn't come out of the womb like that. No, hang on, stop. Probably. What does probably mean? Okay, I didn't come out of the womb like that. Okay, you sure on that? I'm clear on that. So when did you decide that fear of failure was something you needed to worry about? No one's ever asked me that question before.
Hmm.
We're talking about it now. When did you decide the fear of failure was something that was important for you? And it may go back to when they grew up, they're remembering, their father lost a job for a period of time, or their mother lost her job, and it was a very difficult time growing up. And it was very much you cannot lose things. That's a bad thing. But anyway, the net of this is that we talk through. So you're saying that what happened around you impacted who you are, but who were you under the hood?
Hmm.
Who were you? Is that their reality, or is that your reality? And you start to unpack all this, and all of a sudden, that great subconscious argument that they had about fear of failure the thread is pulled. It starts to unravel,
It's like
unravel,
it's like the top of the table, and you take the legs away,
unravel.
because when you ask the questions, they're starting to realize, especially when you ask
Yeah,
questions like always, or what do you mean by
yeah,
that? How do you know that's true? These kinds of questions allow them to be able to start to go, hang on a second, what I thought was sure, what I thought
right,
was thing,
right,
it suddenly transforms from a fact into a belief,
right.
into an opinion, into an idea. And then you get to play around. Then how do you move them from, okay, now you've realized that you're all of this baggage that you held and
Okay,
this belief that you taught all went in this direction, linking back. How do you then help them to start to build back up to, I deserve it? So you bring them from, let's say, negative to neutral. How do you help them to go from neutral to positive?
yeah. So the main thing is to get them to trust their intuition. Right? These are people who've done a lot. They're seasoned. They are trying to apply All of what they learn, their judgment, their sense of the situation, their situational awareness, their sense of understanding people around them. And it's getting them to tap into that, listening to their intuition. At senior levels, they don't have time to analyze everything to death. They don't have time to navel gaze. They have to be making decisions, a lot of decisions all the time. They have to be engaging with people, obviously, empowering people, giving them leadership guidance, but they have to be trusting at a high level where things are going, and they have to be reacting to that, fine tuning, course correcting, as opposed to profound things. And at that level, the speed that they're working in, they have to trust their intuition. They have to be wildly curious, as I
Hmm.
mentioned earlier, in order to lean in to get additional data points where necessary. But they also have to be very grounded within themselves. They have to be recharged. They have to manage their energy, and that's really important. Managing your own energy level. There's a finite resource around that, and balancing that effectively.
Fantastic. I want to talk about one more sort of big topic as we bring this towards a close. I mentioned this book at the beginning. This is chronicles the seventh peak for you, which was Mount Everest, right? And not just going to base camp, actually climbing the mountain. When there's lots of metaphors about, and I know you use the metaphor in terms of we all have an Everest that we want to climb. And, as leaders, one of the things you do is you help people to climb their own mountains and to be able to find the answers. I want to talk a little bit about your mentality or your mindset, where when you're doing something that extraordinary, where you get the resilience from, where you get the determination from, where you get your why from. Because I think that accomplishing something like that requires a massive amount of mental strength. What is it that you do that inside your head that got you to be able to accomplish? And sometimes people say, I don't know, I'm just one of these people. I want you to dig, if you would, for us now. What is it that drove you to do what it is that you've done, and how do you keep going when you're doing ridiculous things like
There's
this?
two parts to that. The first part is it was a wonderful sense of inferiority complex that drove me to climb Everest. So left Ireland at 19, 20. I was four out of five boys in the family. In our house, I was compared a lot to my elder brothers. They did this. You got to do, you're following the path of three greats. You got to be great too. That was the expectation, right? So I was always super driven, super ambitious. And that was very important to me. It was like I would achieve and I would get promoted and I would do additional things and then went to business school and I'd change industry and I became a CEO. There was always this need to prove that I could always do better and graduate to the next. And I got to Everest and the seven summits. The seven summits are the highest peak on each of the world's seven continents, for those who aren't familiar with that term. And I always said I'd never do Everest because I thought it was beyond my pay grade. And then I did the six, and people were asking me nonstop, especially in America, when are you doing Everest, Vivian? And I was coughing and spluttering and saying, well, it's a lot of time, it's very expensive. But the real answer was, I don't know if I'm experienced enough or good enough to do it. And then I met a guy who was organizing an expedition. He answered all my questions, and I signed up like a clown. I signed up. And I didn't look at any videos. I didn't go online. Didn't read any books. I wanted to be completely sanitized, Everest to be sanitized, because I was terrified of heights, always been. So not only had I had this innate need to prove to myself, that I was good enough, but I was also terrified of heights. So I signed this big check. I trained relentlessly. I went to Kathmandu in Nepal, and then the journey began. And that was 2 months on a mountain, which was incredibly difficult for me because it all started to fall apart as I got higher and higher up the mountain. And what fell apart was my ego was that it was the seventh summit. And that's why I needed to kind of complete this jigsaw. And everyone was asking me. But the other piece I realized on summit day was that I was trying to prove to others and also to myself that I was strong enough, that I was ambitious enough, that I was a good enough son, I was a good enough brother, I was a good enough person, I was a good enough, leader for the work that I did as an executive
Was it
coach.
was the others mostly and largely because you wrote about it in the book? Was it mostly your dad?
I'd say it was unconsciously, but a lot of other things had gone with
Hmm.
that. Of this idea of being very back to the Irish model of failure not being good because people will slag you off for it and never forget it. Um, so to avoid that, so the drive to achieve was overwhelming. And of course, on summit day, Everest is the great equalizer because it is what it is. You're physically dealing with something that you cannot get ahead of that. Your body is your body, your mind is your mind. So summit day for me was incredibly difficult, and all of that stripped away, and I felt naked on summit day inside. I didn't know why I was there because I realized I was trying to prove to everybody else, and that was what was driving me, which was ridiculous. Now I came down the mountain. I did get to the summit. The book goes into great detail about the journey, but I came down a different person. And that's the second half of the journey here, right? The first half is the way I lived my life before. The second half, hopefully a much more compelling half, is the way I want to live my life after.
One of the most powerful, if not the, actually, no, the most powerful part of the book, and I think I've shared this with you before. I read the book, but I also listened to the audiobook, and I was on a treadmill while listening to the audiobook. And there's a part that you talk about, and this is obviously connected to my own stuff as well. But when you talked, you rang home and you talked to your dad. Could you share that with us? Because I was on the treadmill and I was like, I lost. I was in
Yeah,
a gym, and I started crying because I was hearing this conversation.
yeah,
But it was so profound because it really speaks to, sometimes you talk about being naked. Sometimes it's like the relationships that we have with the closest people to us. It's Ireland is not known for its capacity, as you mentioned earlier, to be able to communicate in a full whole way about exactly what we feel.
right.
We guard with humor, right? Again, our advantage is our weakness. When you talk to your dad, could you give us a little bit of a setup and just walk us through that conversation? Because I still to
Yeah,
this day feel affected and impacted by that because while Everest is incredible, it's the meaningfulness that came
right,
into that
right.
conversation.
I mean, the setup was my dad was, father of five boys. He had a very difficult childhood. And I think he lived his life in making sure that that wouldn't be replicated through us. So he wanted us to be successful. He wanted us to be driven, but also be humble at the same time. Um, and I think he never gave us compliments. He thought compliments would go to our head, and that would risk
Which
us
is a
being.
very Irish thing to
It's a
do.
very Irish
Yeah,
thing
yeah.
as well. So he wouldn't get compliments. He would get compliments to my friends if I was. I used to do a lot of horse riding and show jumping. I used to compete in with that when I was younger and a kid. So he would wax lyrical to my friends about how great I was and how hard I worked and all the things I was doing day to day to get to the competition and compete. And I would hear through them what he thought of me. And as a kid, I was thought it was mad. Why would he not tell me? And I felt that loss. I felt that missing. And I was watching too much American TV. In America, everyone loves each other and
Yeah.
everyone
You're the
tells
best.
everyone you're the
I
best and
believe in
little
you.
Johnny, little
Yeah, yeah.
Mary. So that's kind of the backstory to it, right? But he wants us to be driven and he wants us to be humble. And those are his values, core values. I get to Everest. I climb this mountain. I said at the top, summit day was profoundly revealing for me. The question was, why are you here? And the answer was, I don't know. I'm here for the wrong reason. It's not about others. It's about me. Came down the mountain. We had one more night. It takes about 4 days to get from the summit of Everest down to base camp because you are, coming down very tricky pieces and collecting your equipment along the way. The most dangerous part was the Kumbu Icefall. It's the last hairy part. And it was our very last night on the mountain. We were all so excited. to get there because we could see base camp below us. And the next morning we were going to get down there. So I remember it was dark. I grabbed a satellite phone. I left the tent with my climbing colleagues. I went out. It was really cold. It was a full moon. And I remember calling Ireland. And, I was literally hearing the phone click, click, click. You almost hear it or imagine it going up to the satellite, bouncing off a few more, and eventually getting to Ireland. And I missed it 3 times. It didn't get through. It didn't get through. It didn't ring. And then I tried, well, let me try one more time. And the purpose was I just wanted to tell my family I was almost at base camp and that I had summited because they didn't know. Um, and then the phone rang and the Irish ringtone. And then my father answered the phone. And I remember hearing his voice. And the moment I heard his voice, I basically just broke down immediately. I cried and cried and cried for about 60 seconds, uncontrollably. And the word that was running through my mind at that time when I felt his voice was the word love. Never expressed by him. He was at that generation where I love you, unknown, on TV, not here. And I felt that. And that for me was it was a feeling of all of the things, the sacrifices that he and my mother had made for me to be on this mountain, standing with the satellite phone on my ear. All of that came home in that minute of immense tears. Never cried like that before. It stopped like a thunderstorm. It just stopped. I took a breath and I asked him, how are you and mom doing? And he told me, and we had a conversation. And he said to me, we are very proud of you. First time. So it was an immensely powerful moment. And I remember we told him how difficult it was. I told him I didn't make it. It was hard. And it was, I went through a little bit just for 30 seconds of it was really difficult. And it's a very tough journey. And, it really shook me. But I'm going to call you guys from base camp. So we said goodbye. Dad said to me, last thing he said to me was, you're on the phone. And I know it's costing a lot of money.
That's very Irish as well. Yeah, yeah.
Pull us from base
We
camp.
just stop that now. Come on, put it away.
Costing a lot of money.
That's right.
Like about to try the Kumbo ice fall. That generation got to the bottom. And then a family member, I called another family member and they congratulated me and said, we're all very proud of you and all that. And they said, I heard from Dad that it was very difficult. Vivian, let me tell you one thing. That story is not important. What's important is he got to the highest point on earth. Don't you worry about how difficult it was or telling people about that. You got to the highest point on earth and we're all very proud of you. Guess what happened next? I erupted. I got angry.
Yeah.
Shouldn't have done it. I got angry briefly
Yeah.
for a few seconds. Nothing too dramatic. But what I said was, I'm going to stop you right there because what you're saying is so wrong.
Yeah.
I've lived my life and I realize this on Summit Day that I've been so blooming conscious of what other people think and filtering that
Sure.
to what would land well or be reasonable or be optimal.
To get this shiny white object.
To get the shiny white object. And they were saying, well, it was a wonderful moment because Owen, I realized I had changed.
Yeah.
For me to have a visceral reaction,
Yeah.
to just talk about the positives, forget about the negatives, meaning the whole story was what was clear. And I didn't know at that time how I would put it together and articulate it, but I just knew that comment was wrong. And I said, you don't know the man who's come down the mountain. It's a very different man who's come down the mountain. And you will meet me when I come back to Ireland, in a few months' time. What I went through is the story. Every wart matters. Every moment matters. The success matters. But more importantly, the warts matter even more. That is the story. Recognizing my barnacles, recognizing how to let go of them. And that stays with me to this day. and hopefully till the day they put me in the ground.
How how
Those
did
point
how
of
did
relevance.
how did that change your relationship with your dad? Like, and I'm not
Yeah,
saying it made a gigantic difference and the two
right.
of you were hugging every time you saw him, but from your own
Yeah,
perspective, how did, even if it's internally mainly in the way that you felt,
right.
what was
I
the
but something funny, when I went back to Ireland after that for holidays and so forth, and when I said, goodbye to my parents before I left for the airport, I would say, I love you guys, and I did that a couple of times, and then he started saying that.
wow.
So he started saying that, and he put in a word at the end, very much. That was a big
Mm,
deal. So again, just you know, and I think this thing comes in when people are always worried. Yeah, but if I do that, they don't understand that. My parents or my boss or my colleague, they don't think like that. What are you talking about? How do you know?
yeah,
Oh, just how they behave. When you come back to it, there's a person under all those layers. There's a person who wants to be seen, a person who wants to be respected, a person who wants to be loved, a person who wants to be cared for. That's the reality. We see it with children. We see it with our parents. So, my voice of wisdom to people is, for God's sake, get off your backside, find your voice, and say the things. If they don't say anything back to you, it doesn't matter.
hmm,
Say it from the heart. You don't have to get teary. I got teary because I've been holding back for all those years. And maybe there is a tearful moment because it's a release. Good for you. Rinse and repeat. Do it when you mean it. I always laugh at my American friends. It's like everyone loves everyone all the time, everything. Too much love.
so
Do it
sometimes,
when you mean it.
yeah,
And then people realize it. It's like giving people a compliment.
yeah,
People who work with you, you give them feedback because you mean it, not because you're telling them every single thing they
sure.
do is great or everything they do is terrible. No, because it's balanced and
And
thoughtful.
and I think it's also that you have a certain amount of time with the people that you love. And I'm not just
Right?
talking, I mean, parents are one thing, but it's also
Yeah.
like, friends or, colleagues, loved ones, relationships. It's the people you have a finite amount of time,
Right.
and sometimes that time runs out. And while you have that time to make the most of it,
No regrets, Owen. No regrets. And if you have them in a certain situation with a person, take that learning again, curiosity toward learning, and move the needle with somebody else. So you feel as though, okay, I should have said that with that situation. I don't get to turn the clock back on that, but I'm going to do a better job with somebody else or that person in another situation. I'm going to learn from that. I think if we feel that we're learning, and every day I like to think I'm doing a little better. I'm flawed. I'm doing the best I can, but I've got to grow every day because if you stop growing, then you become a husk who lives in the museum of the past. And who wants to go to the museum of the past? It's irrelevant. It's already happened.
and
The
and a,
present is all that matters. The present becomes your future.
and a big part of that growth comes through the adversity and the hard times you face.
Right,
Because if Everest wasn't as challenging as it was, you wouldn't have grown as much as you did. You wouldn't have
right.
experienced what you did, and you wouldn't have the completely different way of feeling and thinking and your different philosophy of life since.
Yeah, and one word I think are one of the hardest words we give upon ourselves is the word shame. Shame for screwing up, shame for failing, shame for making a mistake, shame for if I ask for help, that people will look, that I'll let myself down. And getting past that word, um, being authentic. Yeah, looking for the best in people uh, with purpose and being relentless. This is not about bells and sandals. This is about a voice that leads to purposefulness. That's a new word. Um, and moving the needle.
And just finally, one last question. When we talk about authenticity, at the same time, people sometimes use authenticity as an excuse. Like I remember once I was delivering a leadership training, and this guy comes up to me before and says, "I know you're going to do all of this like emotional stuff, or getting in terms of being aware of yourself and being empathetic to people," but he goes, I did a leadership survey, and I'm an authoritative dictatorial leader. It's who I truly am. It's my authentic leadership style. So I'm not going to really get anything from the workshop, right?" And I'm going, How's that working for you? And he goes, well, it's the turnover is high. It's tough to get good people these days. And for me, whenever we talk about authentic, because it's a word that's bandied out a lot and it's critical, but there's also the desire to look, for example, come across professional. So how do you kind of talk about the balance between being yourself, but at the same time putting on a good first impression, dressing well? Because there's also the pretentiousness that will come with the reason why I do this is to signal to you, look how important I am. We all signal, but how do you sort of balance the desire to be authentic on the one hand,
Mm.
but at the same time to be able to present yourself in an optimal way
Yeah,
in, let's say, a professional environment, for
it's a good
example?
point. It's a good point. One has to be sensitive to where people are coming from, their frame of reference. If it's family, it's fine. You're stuck with family for the rest of your life. You'll always navigate. You're always finding a way to navigate through that. Um, Most of the time, it works great, but sometimes you will need to navigate. With people who don't know you that well, then how you show up, and people may say to me, "Well, I don't, dressing for the role I have, I don't care about that. I just think it's irrelevant." Belief system kicks in, irrelevant. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, we do a 360. We got lots of feedback saying, "Look, I love, um, this leader, but they show up to the meetings on time. They don't show up to the meetings on time. We're left waiting. When they come in, they're a little ramshackle. They're not put together that well, and they're so good. And they're such a good person. And they're such a great mind."
But
Distraction. I like to say, take away the distraction. Anything that distracts from what you're saying or your actions is going to get in the way. If it matters, does it really matter that much if you know, put on a shirt, or if you're representing yourself as a leader in a certain way, coming up to your meetings on time? Is it that important to you to just arrive 10 or 15 minutes late because, you think you're so busy doing other things, or you're not showing up? A point to distract people, look up to their leaders. They want to look up to you. Anything that where you express yourself in a way that's a distraction for them.
I
They're not
love
hearing
that.
what you're saying. They're not hearing your message. And of course, you're putting all your effort into getting the message
Mm.
across. So distractions a
I
cost.
love the way you reframe that. I think I haven't thought about it like that before, and I really like that. It's that it's not so much about I need to put in the effort to do it. It's that, well, you're already putting in the effort to not do it. And that's distracting them from what you're ultimately trying to accomplish. It's again, get back to your whole default state. How you are at your best is the ultimate you. And that's where you're always going back to. So I
Right.
absolutely love that. Where should people go to learn more about you and what you do?
InsideUS.com.
Inside.
InsideUS.com or LinkedIn. I got a LinkedIn profile. I do posts a couple of times a week. Yeah, and share my thoughts and love interaction. So it's a very much a learning curve for everybody, hopefully, who goes to that.
Well, look, we've been friends for a number of years now. I got to know you a few years before I moved here, and it's great to have a supportive friend in New York, fellow Irishman. And it's really great. I always enjoy and love our chats and delighted to be able to have the chance to talk to you today. So, big thank you. If you haven't already, get your hands on this book. I'm telling you, it's phenomenal. It is such a great read, and it's just full of wisdom as well. But a big thank you to you.
Thank you to you, Owen. And again, you came here, and I was trying to think about this last night, 7 years ago or
That
8 years
was,
ago.
yeah, well, I came here about 7 or 8 years ago, like during the summer,
Yes.
but it was, yeah, 2019. So I'm 5 years living here, 5.5 years
But
now at
I
this
mean, what
stage.
you've built in the last 5, 6 years is phenomenal. And I think that, yeah, that journey and that opportunity, which we're all graced with
Yeah.
as immigrants in this country, I just love it. So anyway,
Uh,
congratulations to you, and thanks for inviting me
Thank you.
today.
No, look, it's been great and business is amazing and been very lucky and even luckier to have the right kind of people around me. So thank you, mate.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Cheers. Thanks a lot, buddy. So this has been the Change Your Minds podcast. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. And as always, make sure you go into the future. Hopefully, I'm sure you've learned a massive amount of great ideas and lessons, wisdom from Vivian. But in the future, make sure you go in there, do the very best that you can, and may the force, as always, be with you. Take care. See you soon.